Hey guys, what's up? It's Savannah. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to a true crime video here on my YouTube channel. As you guys can tell by the title of today's video, today we are discussing the unsolved disappearance of Jennifer Dulos. Now, this has been a case that has been highly suggested by you guys ever since it happened. Jennifer went missing in 2019, and I specifically remember the day that she went missing, you guys sending in her case. And so it has been a while. There have been a lot of developments in her case. However, regardless of those developments, it still remains unsolved, and I thought it would be a perfect case to go over today. So with that being said, we're just gonna jump right on into it. So this is Jennifer Dulos. Jennifer was born on September 27th, 1968 to her parents Gloria and Hilliard. She was born in New York City and has an older sister named Melissa. And Jennifer graduated from Brown University in 1990. And after graduating from Brown, she went on to earn her master's degree in writing from New York University Tisch School of the Arts. Now, growing up, Jennifer came from a very well-off family. Her father worked in finance and her mother had her doctorate's degree in child education. Now, as I'm sure we've all experienced, sometimes when someone has a very well-off upbringing, they grow up with everything they could want. It oftentimes links them to having an egotistical attitude, for being arrogant, for being not the most pleasant person to be around. But that couldn't be any further from the truth for Jennifer. Jennifer is described as the warmest person. She's extremely humble. She's extremely kind. She's very soft-spoken, very down to earth. She's said to have a very warm energy about her that really just drew people to her. So now let's fast forward to the year 2003. In 2003, Jennifer actually reconnected with an old classmate of hers from Brown University. She reconnected with this classmate at the Aspen airport, of all places. And this is someone that she knew when she went to Brown. However, after they both graduated, they kind of moved on with their lives, went separate ways, and she hadn't heard from him since. However, coincidentally enough, they reconnected at the Aspen airport, and after connecting there, they decided that they wanted to meet up again following this first interaction in a more formal setting. Now, this man is named Fotis Dulos. Fotis was born on August 6th, 1967 in Turkey, actually, and he spent his childhood in Athens, Greece. Fotis ended up moving to the United States in 1986 and graduated from Brown 1 year prior to Jennifer graduating in 1989. After attending Brown, Fotis earned his MBA in finance from Columbia Business School. And interestingly enough, when Fotis met Jennifer, or reconnected with Jennifer, Fotis was actually married. He had married a woman named Hillary in the year 2000. And so at this point, meeting Jennifer, this was 3 years into his marriage. However, his marriage with Hillary officially ended on July 12th, 2004. Now, when it came to Fotis's personality and who he was as a person, he was known as a very outgoing man. He loved to be doing things constantly. He had a very lively personality. He got along with everyone. He was very charming, very suave. And that's one of the reasons that Jennifer was so attracted to him. She really liked that he was a well-educated man who also had this incredibly charming side that seemingly had a lot to offer. Now, even though, again, Fotis was still technically married at this point, him and Jennifer went on their first official date in 2003, and they really hit it off. Like I said, Jennifer loved the fact that he was super charming, and they seemed to have a really strong connection. Something that Jennifer also really liked about Fotis was the fact that, according to him, he made a very big deal over the fact that he wanted to be a family guy. His goal was to get married, have kids, settle down. Again, I know it's ironic considering he already was married technically at this time. However, this was a point that he really hit home to Jennifer. That was his end goal. He wanted the family, he wanted the house, he wanted the kids, and that was really appealing to Jennifer because that was exactly what she wanted as well. Now, after their first date, like I said, the two of them hit it off and continued to date up until they got married on August 28th, 2004. And at that time, Fotis had only been officially divorced from his first wife for a month at that point. And after getting married, the two of them picked up from their home in Manhattan and moved to Farmington, Connecticut to start a family. Fotis also used this time to start his own company. He founded a real estate development company and actually designed the home that him and his family lived in. And once he really got his company rolling, that is when Fotis and Jennifer started having children, and they had 5 children in total. And the way that this happened is actually very, very unique. Their 5 children consist of 2 separate sets of twins. So how it went chronologically is that they had their first set of twin boys, then they had a second set of twins, which were a boy and a girl, and then they had their last child, which is their daughter. Now, with having all of those kids, they needed a big house to accommodate them. So Fotis built them a beautiful 6-bedroom mansion, and it had all of these different amenities to accommodate their family. But even though on the outside, this family looked like they have everything and more, they have the beautiful house, the beautiful children, the marriage, they had everything on the outside, they were really struggling internally behind closed doors. Fotis had a very, very quick temper, and this caused their marriage to suffer completely. An example of Fotis's temper is that he was an avid water skier. He loved water skiing. He would participate in international water skiing competitions, and he really took his love for water skiing and implemented that onto his children. By the time his eldest children were 6 years old, he was already signing them up to be in international water skiing competitions themselves. And at first, the whole water skiing thing for his kids started out as a fun activity. Of course, they're really young at this point, so them doing water skiing is purely just for fun in their minds. However, Fotis really pushed the water skiing thing over time, and Jennifer started to notice that it wasn't becoming fun for her children anymore. This became too much. Fotis was too intense with it, and so she confronted him about this. However, when she did, Fotis would lose his mind. He would get incredibly angry and defensive every time that she would bring this up, and that is just one example of his poor temper, and that really was also the beginning of their tumultuous relationship and tumultuous arguing. Over time, Jennifer and Fotis started spending less and less time together because of their constant arguing, and Fotis would use this as an excuse to spend more time away from home. He would constantly leave on different work trips as well as water skiing competitions, and while you may think that would affect Jennifer negatively, it honestly really didn't. She actually preferred her time when Fotis was not around because she was able to run a much smoother household. So now let's fast forward to 2017, and in the beginning of 2017, Fotis traveled to Miami, Florida to participate in a water skiing competition. Now, while he was at this water skiing competition, mind you, this was a skiing competition for himself. He was in Miami by himself. He ended up meeting a woman named Michelle Troconis. Michelle was from Venezuela and worked as an ESPN reporter in South America. Once Michelle and Fotis met, just after spending a little time with her, Fotis realized that him and Michelle had more in common than him and Jennifer ever did. They were both very competitive by nature and liked to do a lot of outdoor activities together. And according to Michelle, she said that when she met Fotis, she was under the impression from what Fotis had told her that him and Jennifer were already separated. And here's where I kind of want to circle back around to what I said in the beginning about Fotis having a wife initially before meeting Jennifer. Now he's married to Jennifer and he meets Michelle. This is a pattern for him. This is something that he does. But with Fotis being gone as often as he was, it wasn't hard for Jennifer to put the pieces together that something may have been going on behind the scenes, meaning an affair. Jennifer was pretty positive that Fotis was having an affair, so she decided to confront him about it. And instead of denying the affair or losing his temper on Jennifer, Fotis actually completely came clean to Jennifer. He told her all about the infidelity that had happened and that he had been seeing Michelle for a while at that point. And to Jennifer, this was not a surprise. She honestly just felt relieved to know the truth, and once she did, on June 20th, 2017, Jennifer filed for divorce from Fotis. That same month after filing for divorce, Jennifer also rented a house in New Canaan, Connecticut, which is about 70 miles away from Farmington. Now, what's really interesting and telling in these divorce court documents is Jennifer's statement in them. In the divorce court documents, Jennifer states, quote, "I know that filing for divorce and filing for this motion will enrage him. I know he will retaliate by trying to harm me in some way." End quote. Now, I think that that is extremely telling. It just goes to show that Jennifer had a bad feeling about Fotis this entire time. She was clearly afraid of him and clearly afraid of what he was capable of. In the divorce court documents, Jennifer went on to say that Fotis had threatened to kidnap their children if Jennifer did not comply with his terms in the divorce settlement. After Jennifer moved out of the Farmington house, Fotis wasted absolutely no time in offering Michelle to move in with him. So after Jennifer moved out, Michelle and her daughter moved in with Fotis into the Farmington house. And in March 2018, Jennifer was granted sole physical custody of her children. However, both her and Fotis shared legal custody. So basically, her kids lived with her. She was the physical caretaker of it. However, if it ever came to something legal, they both had 50-50 rights on that. However, Fotis was only granted supervised visits and supervised phone calls, which is an agreement he was not happy with. So now that you have that background, let's move on to May 24th, 2019, the day that Jennifer Dulos went missing. Now, May 24th was a day where Jennifer Dulos had a very packed schedule. On this day, she was scheduled to take her kids to school by 8 o'clock in the morning as usual, and then she had an 11:30 a.m. doctor's appointment as well as a 1 o'clock p.m. doctor's appointment in New York City. Now, what was different about this day than any other day was that May 24th was a half day for her kids at school, so they got let out of school at about noon, which obviously conflicted with Jennifer's schedule having a 1 o'clock appointment in the city. So Jennifer reached out to her babysitter, which is a girl named Lauren, and asked if Lauren could pick her kids up from school, take them back to the house, and just kind of wait there until Jennifer got back later that afternoon, which Lauren agreed to do. Now, before picking the kids up, Lauren drove over to Jennifer's house in New Canaan just to kind of situate herself, put her stuff down before getting in the car and driving off to the kids' school. However, when Lauren arrived to Jennifer's house that day, she noticed multiple things that were very wrong. Lauren arrived to Jennifer's home at 11:30 a.m. and when she got there, she noticed that Jennifer's Range Rover car was still in the driveway. This struck Lauren as odd because Jennifer had specifically told Lauren that she was going to be taking the Range Rover car. Now, Jennifer had two cars. She had a Range Rover as well as a black Chevy SUV, and even though the Range Rover was in the driveway, the SUV was not. So Lauren thought, even though she told me she was specifically taking the Range Rover, maybe something happened and she just needed to take the Chevy instead. So that was the first thing that threw Lauren off a little bit, but again, there was a bunch of different explanations for why Jennifer would take the SUV, so she didn't think much of it. And then once she walked inside of Jennifer's home, she noticed that Jennifer's purse was on the floor. Now, this was a little strange for Lauren for multiple reasons. First off, Jennifer took her purse everywhere. And for anyone who carries a purse, you know that if you are going somewhere, you typically take your purse with you, especially if you're taking a trip such as going to a doctor's appointment or driving a certain distance to the city or to downtown, you're typically gonna take your purse. So the fact that the purse was left on the floor was very, very alarming for Lauren, but she continued on with her routine, and that is when she noticed that on the kitchen counter was actually a cup of tea as well as a granola bar. Now, for most people, you might not think that this is a big deal, but Jennifer was the type of person who is very meticulous. She's very organized. She does things a certain way, and she's not the type of person that would just leave out food or dishes. So the fact that she left out tea and a granola bar was a little off-putting just because it's not like her behavior at all. But again, Lauren thought maybe something happened. Maybe she was just in a rush to get out the door, and that's why it was there. So Lauren went to go grab some paper towels to then clean up the area a little bit. And when she went to grab the paper towels, Lauren noticed that there were only 2 rolls of paper towels left. Now, the only reason that this struck her as odd was because Lauren was at the house the day prior on May 23rd, and there were 12 full rolls of paper towels in Jennifer's home. So once Lauren saw that there were only 2 rolls left, it obviously sparked the question of what could have possibly happened from the day before to now in a 24-hour period that would cause Jennifer to use 10 full rolls of paper towels. Now, nevertheless, Lauren went about her day and she went to pick up the kids at 12 o'clock and brought them back to the house. Now, once Lauren picked up the kids, she texted Jennifer at 12:43 p.m. telling her that the kids had been picked up, they're back at the house, and everything was all good. However, Lauren did not receive a text back, which was very unlike Jennifer. Then at 1:10 p.m., Lauren decided to text Jennifer again to check in with her a second time. However, Jennifer did not respond to that text either. Lauren sent Jennifer a third text at 2:30 p.m., but got no response to that as well. Then after waiting a little bit at 4 o'clock p.m., Lauren decided to call Jennifer directly instead of texting her because this was was around the time that Jennifer said that she was going to be home. Her last doctor's appointment was at 1 o'clock, so she figured more than likely the appointment was over. However, when Lauren called Jennifer's phone, the phone went straight to voicemail, and this is when Lauren started to panic. So Lauren started reaching out to some of Jennifer's friends, who all basically agreed that this was very, very unlike Jennifer. She never went MIA like this. She was always very responsive via text, so this was definitely something to be concerned about. Now, after some time went by and still not hearing from Jennifer, on May 24th at 7 o'clock p.m., Lauren dropped the kids off at Jennifer's parents' house located in the city, who had also not heard from Jennifer that day. And that is when a missing persons report for Jennifer Dulos was filed at 7 o'clock p.m. on May 24th, 2019. Before we move on any further, I do want to take a second and thank our one sponsor for this video.
Okay, you guys, I want to take a second and talk to you about BetterHelp. If you've never heard of BetterHelp before, BetterHelp is an online counseling service that provides you with professional counseling in the comfort of your own home. Once you sign up with BetterHelp, you will then take a very simple survey, and based off of the answers on that survey, you will then be matched with a counselor from BetterHelp. BetterHelp has counselors that specialize in so many different arenas, including grief, anxiety, depression, relationships, family trauma, sleeping issues, anger, and more. Once you're matched with your counselor, you will then be able to set up appointments with them, whether that is phone call, video call, and you'll even be able to text your counselor as well. If for whatever reason you feel like you didn't get the right fit with your counselor, you will always be able to change counselors free of charge. BetterHelp is available worldwide, and financial aid is available for those who qualify. And if you guys want to try out BetterHelp today, you can do so and use my discount code by going to betterhelp.com/instinct to get 10% off your first month. Again, that is betterhelp.com/instinct. I love BetterHelp, and they have been incredibly helpful with me and my life and my mental health, and I know that they will be for you as well. So go to betterhelp.com/instinct for 10% off your first month today.
Now, police jumped on this case right away. They wasted no time, and the first thing that they wanted to do was search through Jennifer's home. Now, when they went into Jennifer's house, they went into her garage, and this is when the first red flag popped up. When authorities went into Jennifer's garage, they noticed a large dark red stain on the floor of the garage right next to Jennifer's Range Rover car. Looking closer at this stain, authorities noticed that the stain also had a swirl in it, almost as if someone took a paper towel or some sort of product and tried to clean it up. However, they didn't do a great job of it. Near the Range Rover, there were also these giant trash bins. You probably know what I'm talking about. You basically put them at the end of your driveway, and your garbage man will come by and basically dispose of the items in there, and then you take them back. It's basically where you put your trash bags. And so Jennifer had these in her garage, and along with the giant dark red stain that was assumed to be blood, there was also a splatter stain on the garbage bins. Now, after just 1 hour of the missing persons report being filed, Jennifer's black SUV was actually located. The car was located at Waveney Park, which was just about 3 miles away from Jennifer's home. And obviously, after finding her car in the park, the authorities wanted to search the park, because logically, if her car is at the park, you should search the park. Authorities searched all through it using many different measures, including helicopters, search dogs, the FBI was involved. Really anything authorities could think of, they were using. Now, after finding Jennifer's car, authorities knew that they needed to inform Fotis of what has been going on. So they decided to go to Fotis's house and inform him that Jennifer was missing. Now, when authorities showed up to Fotis's house, he opened the door, he talked to authorities, and had told authorities he had not spoken to Jennifer or his kids at all that day. However, he was concerned for Jennifer's safety, so he told police that he was willing to talk to them and answer any questions that he could possibly have in order to help Jennifer's case. Now, what's interesting here is that once it got to the time where Fotis was actually supposed to meet with authorities and he showed up to the station to talk to them, Fotis's lawyer was actually the one to show up, and Fotis's lawyer informed authorities that Fotis would actually not be talking to them and he would not be answering any questions that they could have. Now, obviously, as you can imagine, this is a red flag. bag. Jennifer is the mother of Fotis's 5 children. You would think, being the mother of his 5 children, he would want to do everything in his power to help bring Jennifer home, to help find her safely. However, he refused to talk to authorities. Now, because of this, authorities then went forward and seized Fotis's phone, as well as got a search warrant for his house. Right after gaining Fotis's phone, as well as the search warrant, a big break happened in this case. A neighbor of Jennifer's actually came forward and said that they had surveillance footage because they had security cameras at their house. And basically how their security cameras were positioned was they could see their own front yard, and this was Jennifer's across the street neighbor. And so they could see their own front yard, and they could also see a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit of Jennifer's driveway. So anytime a car would leave or go into Jennifer's driveway, the camera would pick up on it, but obviously it wasn't seeing who's coming in and out of the door. It can't see into Jennifer's house or anything like that. It's strictly just seeing a small portion of her driveway. So of course, authorities looked into the security camera footage, and the footage showed that at 7:58 a.m. on May 24th, a Range Rover, Jennifer's Range Rover, pulled out of her driveway to take her kids to school and then returned back home at 8:05 a.m. The car then leaves the driveway again at 10:25 a.m. So with having this new footage, authorities wanted to track Fotis's phone records, and they wanted to see if Fotis's phone was anywhere near Jennifer's house on May 24th. Now, when they did this, it showed that Fotis's phone was at his house the entire morning of May 24th. But as we all know, even though his phone was at his house on May 24th, it does not mean that he himself was at his house on May 24th. And even though authorities didn't find anything in the morning of May 24th with Fotis's phone being anywhere near Jennifer's home or having any strange activity, there was a lot of strange activity found on Fotis's phone on the evening of May 24th. On the night of May 24th, Fotis's phone was seen making multiple stops in Hartford, Connecticut along Albany Avenue. Now, Fotis lived in Farmington, and Hartford is about 15 minutes away from Farmington. So that in and of itself wasn't the strange part. That wasn't outlandish. What was very strange and sparked authorities' attention was the fact that Fotis's phone showed that he made at least 30 different stops along a 4-mile radius of Albany Avenue. Why on earth would Fotis be making 30 different stops? So once authorities found all this weird activity, they decided they needed surveillance footage. So they teamed up with the Hartford Police Department to try and collect as much surveillance footage from Albany Avenue on the evening of May 24th as possible. They even went to the extent of driving down Albany Avenue and using a speaker to ask people who had surveillance footage to send it in. And this actually worked because they ended up collecting over 12 hours of surveillance footage to sift through. And when they did this, they discovered a black Ford Raptor truck making the identical stops as it showed on Fotis's cell phone. Now, Fotis didn't drive a black Ford Raptor truck. He drove a different car. Now, during the times that this truck would stop at the 30 places that they stopped, a man was seen getting out of the vehicle each time, and this man did match the description of Fotis. And people who have recalled seeing this truck and seeing the man get out of the truck have also said that the person getting out of the car was in fact Fotis. On the surveillance footage, this driver who looks like Fotis is seen dropping off trash bags into trash cans of each of the locations he stops at. And in one of the surveillance footage clips, it's seen that the driver isn't alone. And in fact, he's actually with a woman who matches the description of Michelle Troconis. So after seeing the surveillance footage of a man who looks like Fotis dropping off trash bags into 30 different trash cans, of course, police automatically jumped on this and they went to Hartford and they searched through the trash cans that Fotis had stopped at. And they were able to recover some of the bags from the trash cans. They weren't able to recover all of them. However, when they did and they opened the bags up, the bags consisted of items such as zip ties, a kitchen sponge, paper towels, as well as bloody women's clothing. Another thing that authorities authorities were able to pick up in their search of the trash cans was Fotis's license plate. And weirdly enough, Fotis had actually tried to disguise his license plate by putting pieces of tape over certain letters and certain numbers to make them look like they were different letters and different numbers. However, when authorities removed those pieces of tape and tracked the license plate back, they discovered that the license plate was registered to Fotis Dulos. Now, after searching through all of these trash cans, authorities thought that it was possible that Jennifer's body could be in the Hartford landfill. So they actually spent 3 weeks searching through the Hartford, Connecticut landfill, thinking that maybe Jennifer's body was there. However, they did not find her. Now, at this point, authorities wanted to talk to Jennifer's babysitter, Lauren, and this is when they learned a lot more about how tumultuous Jennifer and Fotis's relationship was. According to Lauren, she said that Jennifer and Fotis were constantly fighting and that Jennifer was extremely depressed because of it. She told authorities that Jennifer wanted to make her relationship with Fotis work, but he wanted to move on and be with Michelle. So he actually had the audacity to ask Jennifer if, while she was living in her Farmington house with Fotis and her children, if Michelle and her daughter could also move into the house at the same time and they could just all live together. Lauren said that Jennifer's final straw in her relationship with Fotis was when she figured out that Fotis had secretly purchased a gun without telling her, and Jennifer found this out because she found the receipt for the gun and she automatically became worried for her safety. So that, along with everything else, is the reason as to why Jennifer left Fotis. Now, at this point, authorities wanted to talk to Michelle Troconis, so they brought her in for questioning. According to Michelle, on the morning of May 24th, her and Fotis woke up together, they slept together, and then they showered together before he went to go and hang out with a lawyer friend of his named Kent. Michelle says after Fotis went to go hang out with Kent, she didn't see him again until he came back to their house at 1 p.m. that day. Michelle said that when Fotis came back, asked if she would go with him to clean up one of the properties of a client of his, which she agreed to do. And you've probably guessed it at this point, the property that Fotis took Michelle to was in fact the home of Jennifer Dulos. But at this point in the questioning, police did not tell Michelle that yet, and Michelle acted like she didn't know that yet. So that was still unspoken. So after going and cleaning up this house that Michelle said that she thought was a client of Fotis's, Fotis asked Michelle if she wanted Starbucks, which she said yes to. And instead of going to Starbucks, they drove down Albany Avenue and made 30 different stops. And Michelle said that Fotis just kept stopping and she was on her phone the entire time, so she wasn't really paying attention to what he was doing. There is a photo of Michelle getting out of the car in the surveillance footage tapes when they're on Albany Avenue, but Michelle claims that the reason that she got out of the car was actually to pick up gum off of the side of the road. So a big thing to note here is that after talking to authorities, Michelle confirms that she and Fotis are the ones driving in the surveillance footage. It's also important to note that Fotis does not drive a black Raptor truck. That is not his car. However, Fotis had rented that car, his company had rented that car for an employee of his, because an employee of Fotis's drives a red pickup truck. However, when he goes to different properties, they want to make it look more professional. So Fotis had rented a black Ford Raptor truck for this particular employee to drive around in, and that was the truck that Fotis was driving in. So after speaking to Michelle on June 1st, 2019, both Fotis and Michelle were arrested. The charges that they were given were first-degree hindering of prosecution as well as tampering with evidence. Several days later, both of them made bond and they were released and put on ankle monitors. But when they were released, Michelle realized she did not want anything to do with Fotis anymore. Her whole claim this entire time is that she had absolutely nothing to do with it. She's completely innocent. She had no idea what Fotis was doing, basically saying, I don't know what he did. He could have done this, but I didn't do this. So because of this, Michelle really didn't want to be connected to Fotis at all. So she ended up moving out of his house and moved into an apartment with her daughter. Now, as a part of their search, authorities also went ahead and searched all of Fotis's real estate properties. They dug up all of his properties, however, found absolutely nothing there as well. Now, this is when something very interesting came up. And around this time is when authorities discovered that Fotis rode a bike. He had a very particular bike, and And the bike that he had has something called ram horn handles. I'll pop up a picture of what those are. And the reason that this ever came up in general is because when authorities looked at the security camera footage from the neighbor that could see into Jennifer's driveway, they noticed that at 7:40 a.m. on May 24th, there is someone on a bike that is seen driving up Jennifer's driveway. Now, this person riding this bike also had ram horn handles. This is not your typical standard bike. It is a very specific kind of bike, and the bike that Fotis had matches the description of the bike in the surveillance footage. And although they weren't able to see the face of the person riding the bike, of course, authorities put two and two together that more than likely it was that footage of Fotis riding up Jennifer's driveway to confront her. Now, real quickly, I kind of want to touch on motive because there are multiple different things that could have been at stake here. The first being the custody agreement. Fotis did not like the fact that he did not have access to his children whenever he wanted. He was also a very egotistical person. Probably didn't like the fact that he didn't have control over the situation. The second thing here is money. Fotis's company was in a massive amount of debt, and Fotis was actually given a loan by Jennifer's father before they divorced. And this loan was millions of dollars. This is a multi-million-dollar loan that Fotis was not able to pay back. And Jennifer's father actually passed away. And when Jennifer's father passed away, Fotis stopped paying back this loan, but it did not go unnoticed because Jennifer's mother obviously kept track of the fact that Fotis stopped paying back this loan. And Fotis also knew that Jennifer's family had basically set up a trust fund for all of their children, for Jennifer and Fotis's children, of $2 million. And a lot of people believe that Fotis could have wanted that $2 million and thought that if he had physical custody of his children, he would be able to dictate where that $2 million went. So that's just a brief touch on possible motive here. Now, once authorities got access to Fotis's home and had the search warrant, they walked in, and when they walked into Fotis's house, they found an alibi script. Now, what I mean by that is they found a script that he had physically written out that states everything that him and Michelle did on May 24th. It says woke up, had sex, showered together, client's house, Starbucks, the whole thing. The whole script was there. And that is just very, very odd. Have you ever gone through a day where you then sit there and write down everything you did just so you don't forget it? So when authorities did their initial search through Jennifer's home, they took a bunch of DNA swabs. They swabbed everything in that house and they sent it off for forensic testing. And when those lab results came back, they were absolutely shocking. Authorities swabbed the red stain in the garage as well as the splatter on the garbage cans and the blood found on the clothes found in the trash cans on Albany Avenue. And each sample showed that all of those things were blood that belonged to Jennifer Dulos. Now, along with that, and the real incriminating evidence here was that authorities also found on the kitchen sink faucet that there was evidence of blood that not only matched Jennifer Dulos, but also matched Fotis. So Jennifer and Fotis's blood was found on the kitchen sink faucet. And along with that, Fotis's DNA was also found on the doorknob in the mudroom of the house. And Fotis did not go visit Jennifer. This is not like he would ever go and see Jennifer. Jennifer was clearly afraid of him, said in their divorce court documents that she was afraid that he would try and harm her. This was not a casual visit. This is not something that they did regularly. So the fact that authorities had not only just his doorknob handle DNA, but they had blood of Fotis and Jennifer on the kitchen sink faucet, it was 100% enough evidence to incriminate Fotis for Jennifer's disappearance. Now, before arresting Fotis a second time, authorities wanted to talk to Michelle one more time. Mind you, she was on bail, and so they brought her in for questioning. This is when they dropped the bomb on Michelle that the house that Michelle went to clean up with Fotis, who he claimed was a client of his, that house actually belonged to Jennifer Dulos. And according to Michelle, she had no idea. And it was when authorities told her this that she then told them she lied about being with Fotis that morning. She was never with Fotis that morning. She said that when she woke up, he was already gone and she didn't see him until later that day when they went on that drive together down Albany Avenue. Now, that's kind of what's interesting here is where I ask you the question, do you think she knew? Because if she did know and if she was an accomplice to the fullest extent, it brings up the question of how much did she know? Was she fully unaware? Did she really think she was just going to clean up a house of Fotis's that day? Now, in September 2019, Michelle and Fotis were arrested a second time, this time for tampering with evidence charges. However, they both were able to make bail and were released on bond a second time. However, that all changed a couple months later when on January 7th, 2020, Michelle and Fotis were arrested a third time. This time, Fotis was charged with capital murder and kidnapping in relation to the disappearance of Jennifer Dulos, and Michelle was charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Now, remember how I said earlier, I mentioned briefly Fotis's lawyer friend named Kent. Well, Kent was also arrested in this, and he was arrested for conspiracy to commit murder as well. And you might be completely confused by that. However, there was a lot of incriminating evidence against Kent stating that he could have also played a part in Jennifer's murder. Kent and Fotis were with each other that morning, and they kind of acted like this Bonnie and Clyde duo. Kent had an ex-wife who stated that when she and Kent divorced, she was afraid for her own safety because she was afraid that Kent and Fotis would come after her and harm her. Kent was also brought into this because there was said to be a shallow grave several days prior to Jennifer's disappearance found at the country club that Kent belonged to. However, when the shallow grave was dug up, there was nothing found. Kent has always maintained his innocence, but there is evidence to prove otherwise. Now, after this January 7th arrest, both Michelle and Fotis were able to make bond again. However, Kent was not able to afford it, so he remained in prison. Now, before a trial ever even was able to start, Fotis claimed that he was not guilty for the charges made against him. The defense team really put out this narrative that Jennifer just left on her own. This was a total gone girl situation, and Jennifer left on her own, and she left her kids and she left her family because she wanted to get back at Fotis, leaving her for another woman, and was just taking it out on him to make his life hell, which is extremely offensive and insulting to Jennifer and her family. Anyone who knows Jennifer knows that she is not going to do this. She's not going to leave her kids, especially for someone like Fotis. She fought like hell to get custody of them, and she did. She's not just going to up and leave them like that. Now, when it came to Fotis on January 28th, 2020, so not long after his third arrest, there was actually an emergency bond hearing for Fotis on January 28th. And on that morning of the 28th, Fotis actually called his new girlfriend. Yes, he had a new girlfriend at this time. Her name is Anna. And Fotis called his new girlfriend and told her to meet him at the courthouse. He would see her there. However, Fotis never made it to the courthouse that day. Instead, he was found by first responders in the garage of his home, suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning after an attempted suicide. He did leave a suicide note, basically just claiming that he was not going to go down for something he didn't commit. I'll pop the note up right here. You guys can see it if you want. But Fotis actually didn't die from the carbon monoxide poisoning that day. He was actually transferred to a hospital where he was announced officially dead on January 30th, 2020 after being taken off life support. Now, what's frustrating about this case is we focus a lot on Fotis. It is very clear that he had something to do with Jennifer's disappearance. Whether that is he acted completely alone or he had accomplices, he was responsible in some way for Jennifer's disappearance. And he basically holds all the pieces to this puzzle, yet he is no longer here. But we still don't know where Jennifer is. We still don't know what happened to her. We still don't know where she's located. And authorities, as well as Jennifer's family, is still working day in and day out to try and find her and bring her home and give her a proper memorial and burial. It is assumed at this point that Jennifer is dead. Everyone has basically come to the decision that she is no longer alive based on all of the blood that was found that was linked back to her. So I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this. Let me know in the comments below. And with that being said, you guys, that is all for me today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another true crime episode here on my YouTube channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah. I make videos a couple days a week. You should subscribe and join the family. I love you so much. I'll be back in a couple days with a brand new one.